Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Zara. Zara, how are you?
Good, Jordan. How are you?
Good. What's been going on?
What's been going on is I just had a little protein bar.
You did, and it didn't look very appetizing, that's for sure.
It did the job.
To tie you over to dinner?
To tie me over to dinner.
Yeah, nice. Good stuff.
How are you? What's been going on with you?
We actually recently did a content shoot.
Yes.
With yourself and Petra, which was good fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about content marketing and content marketing that converts as well. So in summary, we had a content day where it was yourself and Petra. Daniel and I started essentially all the videos, but then we started to get the team involved, which was very entertaining. And I know you also did one for a friend of mine. Yeah. And I saw, so he runs a plumbing business, and I saw that all of his guys got involved as well, all of his staff. Yeah. Awesome.
It was fun.
It was
really fun.
I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, great.
To kick it off, how would you define content marketing for a small business?
It's a good question. I think I would say content marketing in general is all about creating and distributing valuable, relevant content.
Yep.
And so that content can be in the form of written content through like blogs. It can be video content. But I think, at the end of the day, it really comes back to driving or like sharing value.
Yeah, for sure. Why is it important now more so than say 2-3 years ago?
I think the landscape shifted a lot. So obviously like traditional advertising is becoming kind of much less effective in the sense of you can't get a direct return on investment, or you can't calculate a direct return on investment from traditional advertising. I think if we also look at like consumers and behavioral economics and kind of how people are consuming information and absorbing information and seeking information nowadays, online is where that is. So when we talk about content marketing, particularly in this episode, it is going to be about content marketing in the digital kind of format. So I think it's like really understanding kind of how we can increase digital presence, build trust, build authority, create that kind of like one-on-one connection. I've spoken about it before, but back at, pre-e-commerce kind of boom, obviously we did a lot of brick and mortar shopping. And so you used to walk into a store and then be, someone in the shop that you could build that relationship with. Yep. We don't have that anymore. Obviously brick and mortar shopping is still a thing. You're going to do some shopping this afternoon, so I heard. But predominantly in this day and age, it really is online, and people are becoming much more conscious and much more like tech savvy. And so it's really finding a way to create value in that digital format. Yeah,
for sure. When creating valuable content, how would you go about identifying what your audience needs to see, hear, or read, depending on the type of content you're putting out?
That's a good question. And I think it's like the cornerstone of content marketing is actually understanding your customers, understanding their pain points, kind of why they're getting involved, what they might want and need from you. And so that really comes from like engaging with your existing customers, listening to what questions are they asking you? What problems does your product or service actually solve for them? And then use online forums, social media comments, use things like Google Trends to kind of understand what people are interested in, what trends and kind of like waves of communication are happening, and then create content around that. So you're not kind of creating content, I guess, like in this vacuum of like what you think is important. It's like content that's based on what people want.
Yeah, okay, cool. And when we're, something that we've spoken about quite a lot, well, not we, you've spoken about quite a lot on the podcast is content pillars. Do you just want to touch on that high level, what it is, and topic clusters and how that can be relevant to business?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think typically what we would say is like thinking broadly at first.
Yep.
So it's like content pillars are like overarching themes or categories that you're going to create content around, revolving around. So for example, whether you are creating educational content or entertaining content or what that sort of looks like. But essentially what you want to do is create, I would say like 3 or 4 key pillars that any piece of communication or any piece of content that's being created and shared revolves around. Yep. And so for example, if you are like a cafe, there could be like an educational component that could be talking about like, how to brew the best coffee at home or how to create, a coffee at home that tastes like cafe quality, and it could be like a talk through step by step of like how to brew a coffee at home, or something like understanding different coffee beans and single origins and that kind of stuff. You could then maybe have like an entertaining one, which could be something about the team. It could be like a coffee of the week sort of order, like something entertaining, engaging, not necessarily sales related. And then you can have like a sales focused content. So if you're a cafe that sells coffee beans, maybe you're pushing your coffee beans and for people to buy them online. Maybe you run events and you have like a upcoming kind of in-store event. You're promoting tickets for that sort of event. So I think, very kind of high level, they're like these key themes that you create content around.
Yeah, okay, cool. What are the different types of content a business can put out there?
Yeah, so blogs, obviously, is kind of the very, I think, one that everyone's probably quite used to and maybe forgotten about. Video content, and then podcasts is obviously another form of content that is extremely popular. And with kind of the wave of YouTube and things that are changing, smart TVs now, like there's a lot of content and podcast content that's created through video more so than audio content because people are sitting down and consuming information that way. So, then there's other ways of like, guides and ebooks or infographics and that kind of thing, which, really depending on kind of what you're creating. But I think each of these, types of content all have different purposes. And they all, depending on how you create them. So like video content, short form for social media, podcast content, longer form does quite well. Creating things that people can sort of buy into. I think it's just about when you're thinking about creating content, understanding kind of what would resonate with your audience, what type of content, like what are the demographics of people that you're trying to connect with, because that will dictate what content you create and how it resonates and lands with them.
And if you wanted to start to create a content calendar, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We, at Inflection, that's kind of like number one is like the reason a content calendar is important is because it creates this consistency and like a roadmap for like what you're doing for the month, which essentially takes any of the guesswork out of that content creation. You talk to any business owner, they don't post because it's daunting. They don't know what to post about. They said they'd do something on Wednesday and then all of a sudden it's like, it's Wednesday. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. And so you just don't do it. So essentially a content calendar creates this roadmap for you for the month. So how you would go about it is like, cool, brainstorm a whole bunch of ideas based on your audience, based on your content pillars. What are some types of content that you could create? What are some ideas of content that you can create? And then go, okay, well, what's the best format for this piece of content or this topic? And then when are you going to create it? Who's going to create it? What resources do you need to allocate to it? And then go, okay, well, how are we going to distribute it? How are we going to get it out there? I think also part of that is like understanding when you're building out those content pillars and that map is also figure out like what's the purpose of this piece of content? Does it align with a business goal or an objective? Whether it's brand awareness, lead gen, sales, customer support, education, whatever it might be, because you don't just want to like put something out there for the sake of it. The algorithm now is really, really intelligent and it is really identifying value-based content, what people are engaging with. And if you're creating content that's just kind of out there for no reason, it doesn't provide value, it's going to flop. Really important to have that consistency, but then also to have value behind it.
Yeah, for sure. And just to be clear as well, when we are talking about content plan, it doesn't necessarily just need to be a video content. It can be a content plan for SEO and all the other different types of podcasts. Like we have a content calendar for the podcast where we know what episode's going to go out every week or every fortnight. Or every week. So don't just think it's video content. It can be applied across the board to any type of content that you are going to put out there. How do you consistently produce high quality content?
I think that's interesting. And I think one thing that I'd say people maybe forget about is like repurposing of content. So it's like you don't necessarily need to like reinvent or recreate the wheel every single time. What I would say in terms of how to produce high quality content is like batch it. Like what we do with the podcast is we sit down, we come together for 2 or 3 days and we film a bunch of content in a short period of time, which works really well because we kind of end up in a bit of a flow of things. We're not doing like one episode a week. We kind of really get into a headspace for it. You know, in terms of video content, like we did that content shoot for Grayspace, we did it for one of our other clients. So it's like everyone kind of gets in on a particular day, films a whole bunch of stuff. And then also I think, repurposing content's big. So for example, if you have written, or say you've done a podcast episode, get a snippet of that and use it on social media. Turn that snippet into written format and post it on LinkedIn. So it's like, you know, how can you use that information from that episode in, dot points and put it in email newsletter form. So it's one piece of content. There's a bunch of information and time and resources that have gone into creating that initial podcast episode, but you have used that information to create content for 3 or 4 different platforms. So that's the power of repurposing content. If you can actually recognize how you can get the most mileage out of it.
For sure.
And where it can go.
Because from that podcast episode, if it's an hour, you can get clips for Instagram, clips for TikTok. You can even use the show notes and then create a blog.
Correct.
Then you can even use that blog and you can use that as some type of email marketing to send out to everyone. So it's not reinventing the wheel every time. So it's not you do a podcast episode and then you've also got to put, you know, an email out and then you've also got to put a blog together. It's creating like that piece of content, saving time. Yeah, exactly. What are some common pitfalls and how can you stay away from them?
I think number one would be inconsistency. So inconsistency of momentum. So like if you're just like sporadically posting 1 week and then you do nothing for 2 weeks and then you don't do anything for a month, it kills that momentum, which also hurts the algorithm as well. I think selling too hard. No one wants to be sold to. Like we're in a day and age where like we're pretty switched on consumers. We don't need a sales pitch. We don't need someone to, get up in our face. So that's why I think if you are coming up with content pillars, sales isn't the number one. It's not all about getting in touch. It's not all about buy now. And then I think the other one is probably like either having no strategy or just like ignoring your analytics, like not going back and reviewing what's working and why it's working. I think that's important. Is like you don't want to be putting out content that doesn't land. And if you do put something out that does work really well and it gets a lot of traction and it gets a lot of engagement, really break down, okay, why did this work? Was it the hook? Was it the video? Was it the content that was it the value or the education that was, a part of this? So I think that's a really key part to making sure that your content's improving and growing. Yeah, for sure. And be prepared to have some type of strategy behind it. Yes. Content plan at a minimum. And then if you are doing, say a podcast, for example, we've got our talking points that we want to touch on. And it's not to say that like we're not reading off a script here, but they're just key talking points and then you can go from there. And it's the same when we did the content day. We didn't even have talking points. It was just a question. So you or Petra would say something and that would prompt us to talk. Correct. So it's just about being as prepared as possible. Because you want it, when you are doing it, you want it to be valuable. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What are the best ways to distribute content? So I think, depending on kind of what format that content is in, it's making sure that you're getting it to the right people and the right time when they want to receive it. Yeah. So like social media, again, kind of understand what platform your audience is most active on, whether that be Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, X, whatever it might be. I think building your email list is really important. We've spoken about that so many times. It's an own database. It's not relying on an algorithm that's, consistently changing. So building an email list and providing value directly to people, and they can, typically it's a really highly engaged audience. They've chosen to sign up to your email database, but they can also look at it when they're ready. Yep. Again, depending on if LinkedIn is a platform and you're doing a lot of B2B work, maybe that makes sense. You'll be sharing industry insights and company news and leadership sort of stuff. And then whether it's like online communities, whether it's like forums, Reddit forums, Facebook groups, those sorts of things. Conscious that you don't want to spam, but I think, it's just understanding like content creation is part of it. That's only half the battle. The other half of it is making sure that you're putting it in the right place in front of the right people at the right time. Yeah, for sure. SEO, it's an interesting one because it takes time and it's a bit of a slow burn. What are your tips on ways to best leverage SEO? Maybe we should start off with what is SEO and how can we use it to drive traffic? very baseline is like SEO is a way of making it easy for Google and other search engines to understand what your business is, rank your content, and put you in a list of like how relevant your business and the content on your website is to what someone has searched.
Yes.
So it, like you said, it takes time. Typically, most people would say you don't expect anything for 3 months. Reason being, you need to kind of accumulate this knowledge, and the algorithm needs to understand and learn about you and make sure that you're not just posting one random blog and then you don't do anything else. Again, going back to that consistency component. But then also it needs to develop an understanding of the people that are visiting your website, how long they're spending on your website. Are they, clicking around and going to other pages and that kind of thing? Or are they just like quickly disappearing? And then it essentially ranks you and your website and your content based on that. So, I mean, I think in terms of, I think we did an episode maybe this time last year that really dove into SEO, like on-page SEO and technical SEO and those kinds of things. And I think the one that everyone's quite familiar with is like on-page SEO, so like headlines, meta descriptions, images with text associated to them, blogs, that kind of stuff. But then there's like technical SEO, which is much deeper. But I think it's also then understanding how to utilize mobile versus desktop. That's really important. Obviously, it's like 70 or 60% of people visit a website on their mobile devices these days. So making sure that your website and content is responsive to a mobile device. There's nothing worse than getting on a mobile and
it's the worst.
Half the text is cut off the side and you can't read it. Instantly, it's like, I'm not interested. And just again, going back to, back in the day when we used to walk into a store, things were laid out in a certain way. It was really, you've walked into a supermarket or an IGA and it's like, there's some produce here and then there's some produce over there and it doesn't maybe flow. That's kind of what you have to think about in terms of like when you're putting information anywhere. So yeah, it's just about making sure that you have like content that flows and makes sense logically.
And that can be anything, like we said, podcasts, blogs, Instagram reels, long form video on YouTube. It's just to be clear, it's not just videos, it's everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are a couple good examples of Australian businesses, or any business for that matter, that are doing content marketing really well, that some our listeners can just jump on and have a look at, whether it's their website or their Instagram?
An example of one company is, and we've spoken about it in the Inflection course, or Petra has spoken about it in the Inflection course before, is Ryanair. So an airline, European, essentially there was quite a lot of conversation around Ryanair being, the cheap alternative, crappy, small seats. You paid the very baseline fee, but then every time there was an addition, there was, more fees associated. Anyway, and so what they did was they actually lent into these common criticisms that they had about their airline, cramped seats, baggage rules, all this sort of stuff. And they started to create this really humorous content, essentially with customers that would leave like a comment about how small the seats were. And they would lean into that and they would then create this really funny piece of content that essentially made fun of themselves whilst also kind of bringing the customers into it. And so, quite often it'd be like, if you wanted a window seat, it was an extra like €20, all these sorts of things.
They've all started to do that now too.
They've all started to do it.
Sorry to jump in.
No, absolutely. But essentially, you would say that like typically an airline is a pretty faceless brand. Like, everyone's got an airline that they prefer to fly with. Do you have anything really associations with it? Not really. Any real like emotional connection? Not really. But so what they did was they really humanized the brand.
Yes.
And it started to create this really cult following. So their social medias blew up, all of their engagement increased. And then it kind of became this like, people started following the brand because they liked what the brand stood for. And so what would have originally been, just an airline, just a budget airline, has now become the preferred budget airline because people, particularly younger demographic, has seen it on social media and created this relationship with this company.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Ryanair is an interesting one. Their CEO is very outspoken on why they're so cheap. And there was I don't know if it was a podcast or just an interview that I listened to, and he was getting grilled about why did you want to charge people to use the toilets? And he said, because if I can charge people to use the toilets, I'll have less toilets on the plane, which means I can have more seats, which means he can make the airfares cheaper for everyone. But in theory, that's great. But I'm sure the airfares are not going to be cheaper for everyone. Sorry, this is a bit of a rant.
Yeah,
it's not going to be cheaper for everyone. And then he went on to say how, we also, we're going to do standing seats because, same concept. You can make it, you can fit more people and make it cheaper for everyone. But dude, you're not doing that so it's cheaper. You're doing that to make the cash.
It's a business.
It is a business. It's a smart business. And now they're all doing it. Pick your seat. It used to be where you would just pick your seat and it cost you nothing. If you want to pick your seat now.
It's $25.
Yeah, I'm going overseas and we're booking together 2 people. Some of those airlines, I think it was a budget European airline, would charge us to sit next to each other.
Yeah.
And I was
it's
like,
crazy.
Don't worry about it. It's all right. We went to next to each other. We saved €50. That's absurd.
Yeah. No,
for a 40-minute flight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like in Australia now, it's like if you want to, like with Virgin, if you want to choose your flight, it's $25.
Even Qantas is the same.
Qantas is the same. But yeah, we had the same thing where we were flying back from Europe a couple of years ago and we had a stopover in China and we had to kind of like recheck in. And yeah, they sat us at opposite ends of the plane and then I just kind of played a plane anxiety thing and got us sitting next to each other, which was good. But yeah, it's crazy. What used to just be like, cool, I've got a booking.
Yeah.
There's 2 names on this booking. There's 2 seats on this booking. You now have to pay for those 2 people that have very clearly booked together for a particular purpose to sit together.
Capitalism's a beautiful thing, isn't it? It's got to squeeze all the juice out of the orange. That's all they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's all they're doing. It's chaos. Another one, sorry, that we're on this topic, rant, is insurance. So insurance for flight cancellation, insurance for car. If you hire a car, you have a car accident, there's insurance for that. There's insurance for accommodation. But the thing that really annoys me is that if you have travel insurance and you pick the right travel insurance, this is not financial advice, by the way, or I'm not giving insurance advice. So just
let's be clear.
Let's be clear on that. It's all covered. It's all covered.
Yeah.
I went to
or if you have a credit card,
exactly,
it's covered, and you book your flights with your credit card. It's all covered.
I went to Port Douglas and we hired a car, and this person was so persistent on paying an extra $35 a day to reduce the excess if we had a car accident from $5,000 to
it's like $200 or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I was like, dude, we're not doing it.
Yeah,
our travel insurance is, the credit card covers it.
Yeah,
which it did. So because I checked it, he's like, oh mate, you don't know that. I said, you're going to give me the car, and that's the end of the chat. I don't want to hear it, but they keep pressing and pressing. Anyway,
it's very. I think the travel insurance, just as you said that, and car hire is one of the ones that people get sucked into.
Yes.
Because it is the one thing that people go, shit, I'm driving, particularly if you're overseas, I'm driving in a different country, potentially on the other side of the road. I'm not confident. So why, there's a chance. And then they play into that. And you all of a sudden go, oh, there's a chance I could have a car accident because the risks are much higher and I don't want to have to fork out $5,000 or $10,000.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll pay the extra $250 a day.
I've completely railroaded this episode, but perfect example is Bunnings, right? You can hire a van.
Yep.
And they offer the same thing. You pay an extra $25 a day or whatever it is, and they waive the excess of $5,000. I asked the lady working, I said, have you ever, has anyone ever written off one of these cars? And she's like, the only time it's been literally written off, she goes, I've seen it once in 6 months and the cars are hired out every day. So if you, anyway.
Car hire,
scam.
Yeah.
Insurance, scam. Ryanair, scam. But yeah, bit of harmless fun there.
Yeah. Back to the episode.
That was not financial advice or insurance advice. Sorry, you were giving a really good example of Ryanair and their marketing tactics, and we've just gone absolutely flipped that on its head talking about something else. Are there any other Australian businesses that do content marketing really well?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of businesses. I think there's an interesting kind of, and this is just absolutely my own opinion, I think there is a bit of a wave of, and maybe it's a just a perception thing, but I think there's a wave of a lot of things that are being created and shared on TikTok that in my opinion aren't relevant to businesses or potential business success or opportunities, but they do help to create a connection with the team. And I think it's just having to understand, okay, what is the purpose of this piece of content and how does that add value to the business? I think with the rise of TikTok and a lot of like, you know, when we talk about it, people think about like TikTok dances and, you know, walking around the office and asking team questions. I think if it's coupled with valuable educational content that benefits the business, I can see it. Like I think strategically it makes sense for me.
Yeah.
But if all I see coming out from a business is TikTok dances, TikTok trends, I kind of go, what do you how does this benefit your business other than having a follower count or an engagement count?
But then it becomes a vanity metric, right?
Yeah.
Like where's the direct correlation to return on sales or whatever your metric is? So.
Yeah, that definitely didn't answer your question at all, but it's just something that
it's the theme of the podcast.
It's just an interesting thing that I think there's a balance, and I think sometimes I quite often see brands, again, this is absolutely my own personal opinion, but I think I quite often see brands that have maybe lost that balance and it's too focused on the fun trending stuff and it's not actually focused on providing value to consumers. No. Who?
I have no idea. I have no idea. But yeah, it makes sense. So it's sort of just you're doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
And then, if it's a view count, I know nothing about it, but just thinking about it from a finance side of things and like if there's no direct return on what you're doing and you've got 6 people doing TikTok dances for 4 hours a day and you're paying them a wage, for what?
Which I think just goes back to strategy. What are your business goals? What are your objectives? Exactly. And like having that in place and solidified. And then when you are creating this content, how does this piece of content, you know, complement that objective? Even
when we were doing our content shoot, and like the staff are in there and it's all fun.
Yeah.
But like everyone's getting paid to have fun. We're not doing any work. So there needs to be and I'm not saying it's a waste or anything like that, but like we were very strategic in the stuff that we were doing.
Yep.
It wasn't just we were talking about the series, and that I don't know if you've seen that TikTok dance that he does down. I sent it to Petra before. Anyway, I said, hey, I get Daniel to do this for Grayspace, but yeah, like just doing a TikTok dance for the sake of doing a TikTok dance.
Yep.
Like if you get your whole team doing that, it takes an hour.
Yep.
What's it costing you? $400-500 in labor.
Yep.
Plus anyway, that's a bit too much on the finance side.
Yep. I think that again just goes back strategy, goals, having objectives behind, because these platforms can be incredibly valuable.
Yes.
They can be really profitable if you're creating content that ties into a business strategy.
Yes. Yep. Awesome. That was a really good episode. And I think it was important that we highlighted the different types of content, because a lot of the times we talk about it, people may just think video and podcasts and whatnot. The main takeaway for me is the content plan, regardless of whatever you're doing, even if it's videos, if it's a blog. I know when we were doing SEO, all of the blogs, it was all because we had content pillars and then keyword clusters. So like there was a strategy to it. So I think whatever your poison's going to be, whether it's blogs, video, podcast or guides or whatever it is, have a strategy and some type of rationale behind it. So you're not going at it blind. If you go at it blind, you're not going to be able to pivot if it's not working. You're not going to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my takeaway. What about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. I think having that content plan is key. And, you know, understanding your audience, creating value. I think the big thing for me is like creating value.
Yeah.
And then being strategic with what's happening and where it's going.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
If you are looking for some support or just want to know more about content creation or how it could work for you or your business, there is a link in the show notes to have a free discovery call with me. We'll chat through it. And if you need any support or extra help in executing it, obviously we're here for that too. But yeah, reach out. Happy to have a chat. Love to talk through it. Thanks, Jordan.
Awesome. Thanks, Zara.
Thanks for watching this video on the RAS Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.